Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Bonsoir, mes amis. The Montreal Canadiens lost. Oh, 6 goals. Confident. Failed to lose, obviously. Flyers, not so much. Yeah, after ending John Tortorella, man, he just keeps on getting opportunities. Matvei Michkov almost scores a hat trick on Montreal. I'm sure we'll have to have a little discourse about Matvei Michkov tonight. Got lots to talk about, though. We've got to talk about Jovesh. I don't think the goal, or at least the goal totals, do justice how good he is. There's a lot of from night, but let's sloppy, and they weren't ready to start. Bit of a problem, but next, what they actually. I gotta tell y'all that right now, or if you do actually have, and I know that one of our great regular contributors, Outrage, signed up to the Patreon and is not yet on the list. Thanks. I get that fixed. Everybody, audio in and out. Fine. Apologize. All right. I don't know why that's happening. I will try to fix it quickly if I can find a way, but should not be that should not be happening at all. Fun times. Always got to be something. Obviously, I wasn't supposed to host tonight. Kay was, but Kay had. I'll be back tomorrow night as well, but I am here trying to fix audio as fast as I can. For some reason. Might be under filters. That perhaps about my voice low. Not there. Stops cutting out. That's not great. That's not great for the show. So I'm gonna turn up the mic a little bit and see if that helps. I'll get in closer too. I think I might have just figured it out, guys. I think the gain was too low on the mic. I've had the kids by myself tonight, so they've been playing around. I think they might have messed with the settings. So let's get this show started for real. We're talking about the Montreal Canadiens. They just lost 6-4. Or was it 6-4 or 6-3? I'm forgetting now. 6-3 to the Philadelphia Flyers. Oh, no, was it 6-4? Yeah, it was 6-4 because Liney got the last one. Sorry, gents. A little bit discombobulated here by the audio being an issue. Natalie Petty says, your audio is like our team, only there half the time. Yes. Okay. It should be better now? Yes. Okay, good. Okay. So that was all on me, folks. I didn't check the gain before I went live. I apologize. We're all out of practice here. The Canadiens have put us in a situation where we're not starting all the way. We're doing things the same way as them. We're going to do better now. All right. So there's a few things I want to talk about tonight. The first one, though, is that we need to put into context what the Canadiens are right now and talk about expectations and what you should be wasting your energy on or not, right? Because I was hanging out tonight in the game stream chat, or I guess it's just called the game thread on habseyesandtheprize.com, which is where I used to write way back in the day. I helped build that site back in like 2012 to 2015 with a friend of the show, Marc Dumont, who, as many of you who watched last night have learned Marc's going to take a bit of a break here. He's got to get some issues under control with his sleep. It's been a really big thing for him dealing with it post like the pandemic. It's been a problem. So we're trying to do everything that we can to get Marc situated. He might be on for afternoon games only, but for the night games, coming down off of this show where it's exciting talking to you all in the chat and talking about hockey and talking with a guest here and there, it's hard to go to sleep after. You get really amped up, and it's been tough for Marc. Marc and I are getting older now. We're in the late 30s, early 40s stage of life, and when you're up till 2, 3 in the morning, it's a little bit more rough the next day, and the recovery takes a little bit longer. So we're going to give Marc some time off before he comes back. But I'm here. Hayes here. Conor Tomalty is going to join me tomorrow as well. Hopefully for a win. Sorry about that. Just had to take a cold and sinus so that I can stick with you here for tonight. Talking by yourself when you're a little bit under the weather is a little bit more of a challenge, but we're going to have a good show here tonight. So what the Canadiens are right now, let's be real about it. They are not a team that you can expect to make the playoffs. I think this is where I'm seeing a little bit of negativity in the fan base right now because they're on the cusp and we can all feel it and we all want it desperately. And I think the Canadiens are at that same point too, which is why they're playing nervous. I think that I've seen some comments on socials in the game thread at Habs Eyes and the Prize that they look tired. I don't think it's tired. I don't think it's exhaustion. I think it's nerves that they're on the cusp. And even though they've been fumbling the bag a little bit recently, they're still in a spot where they have to lose more than the teams behind them to lose out, right? So they're in a very, very good position overall. This is the hard part. And when you are a team like the Montreal Canadiens, where you're coming out of a rebuild, this is only like 3.5 years into the Hughes St. Louis era, less than. When you're in this situation, you don't have a second line center at all. Caden Gooley is close, but not in. And let's be real, Caden Gooley is the best defensive defenseman on this team by a significant margin. David Savard is really struggling, and you just don't have the depth in terms of scoring to make up for not having a second line center. The fact that the Canadiens are in this position at all is incredible. It's fortunate. It's special. And that's why I think the fan base is so electrified for this group. It's not that they are in this position at all. We always expected eventually to pull out of the rebuild and get back in it. But this step from going from a bad team, an actively bad team, to a team that's pushing into the playoffs is a gigantic step. And usually it doesn't happen like this, where you go essentially bottom 5 into the playoffs. That's not a regular trajectory without somebody like Demidov joining the team that same year. That's something to remember, folks. Demidov's not on the roster. Reinbacher is not on the roster right now. They still don't have a second line center. Caden Gooley is out of the lineup. They're doing it without these core pieces. That's the big takeaway here. And I understand it's hard to move past the frustration of the last 2 games because they sucked. Let's be honest. Like, that third period was brutal to watch. The first period was pretty brutal to watch too. But overall, when they had a chance to seize the bag tonight, they couldn't pull it off. And yes, there were some things that went against them. And we will talk about that. I want to talk about the goalie interference thing and what happened last week with Brendan Gallagher as well. But the fact that they're here at all, it does matter, and it should keep you positive. Terry M says, where does the team even go from here? I think it's the same as we've seen since December. The team that as it is right now is not who they were post Four Nations face-off for that stretch where they were absolutely brilliant. They're not the team that they were in December, where they ran through all the best teams in the league and kicked their asses. They're also not the team that had that big losing streak before the Four Nations, and they're not the team that they are right now. They're all of that. They're all of it put together. And that's what you're going to see over the last 11 games of the season is a pretty even split of that, where it's probably going to be better than 500 hockey, but it's not going to blow your brain out because the fact is they don't have the horses to be the team that wins 10 straight and then railroads the Washington Capitals in the first round. They could beat the Capitals, but it would be like this momentous effort like in 2010, right? It has to be something where you catch lightning in a bottle. This team is on the rise, but they're not there yet. That's something to always be keeping in mind while they have so many big pieces that are yet to be added to this roster. They're already in place within the organization, but aren't ready right for this moment right now. And they're not going to be ready in time for the spring, for the playoffs. Maybe Gooley, maybe Reinbacher even. You never know. But most likely it'll just be Gooley. It won't be Ivan Demidov, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that from letting rage in these kinds of games completely take over your life and ruin your night. Because listen, sports are important and they're fun and they're a release. They can be cathartic and they're emotional and they allow us to experience things collectively where we can rely on each other and kind of, huddle in after the game and have these moments where we are experiencing it together, whether it's sadness or joy or frustration or even fear, of a player being hurt. We're experiencing that stuff collectively. It's awesome, but it's also not your whole life. And I know, as somebody who takes sports very seriously, that it's very hard to move on when you're pissed off. But listen, you got to see the forest for the trees. So that's my big takeaway from this, is that this is the hard part. We've seen other teams in similar situations get to where the Canadiens are right now and fumble the bag at the last point of the season. Now it's time where teams like the Flyers, who are terrible, enjoy playing spoiler. And they have the opportunity to do that, and they have nothing to lose by playing loose. This is what the Canadiens have been for the last few years, right? Where down the stretch, they can upset the apple cart for teams that are on the way to something. This is the part that's so hard to get through. You have to be on it for the last stretch of the 82 games, and then you have to find another level in the playoffs. But I think finding that level in the playoffs is different because there's a level of excitement. This is the end of the grind of the regular season where you've worked so hard the whole time, and it seems like everything you do is, it's that last little leg up the mountain. You're tired, but that's not an excuse anymore. You've just got to find it somewhere to get to the finish line. And that's what the Canadiens' challenge is they've got to find their game in a very short period of time and get enough wins down the stretch to stave off the teams that are behind them. And they can do that. They haven't been able to the last two games. That's the big thing. Conor Tomalty says, I fully run laps around my apartment post show. Man, you kind of have to. The first year that I did Game Over Montreal, my sleep schedule was destroyed. I also did the Olympics that year, which was a horrible decision on my part just by how it affected me. But yeah, doing a post-game show and trying to cool down after and get to sleep, it's tough. You guys are always like, it's so fun being with you guys on this show and interacting and like having that ability to be there live with the fan base and understand where you're coming from. And then I can kind of talk back and forth, and it creates this relationship, and I think it's very special. That's one of the things that I love about this whole thing the most is my relationship with you guys in the chat, or whether you follow on whatever social media, doesn't matter. Chatting with you guys, getting to know you. There's so many people that I've met through this that's it's really important to me. It really is. And I think that this community, like the community building, yeah, online isn't as great as like hanging out in person. I agree. But this is something that we can build together and create something special in Montreal and across Canada. We can create the next thing in media. All right. I'm going to tell you guys about Intri Bijou in a second here. I'm going to flip to their commercial. I actually wanted to go a little bit shorter tonight because I'm tired and it's been a long day and that game kind of sucked, but we're already like 16 minutes in the first segment, so we're probably not going to go short. Let's be real. I don't do a good job of talking less. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's the whole ADHD thing. I like to talk a lot. All right, we're going to talk about Jakub Dobeš and Sam Montembeault in a second here in the second segment. But first, I want you to hear from Inchu Bijou, which is an amazing company here in Montreal run by a friend of mine named Astrid. And they're just really damn cool. So here you go. We are so excited to tell you about our new partner here at Game Over Montreal, a delightfully witchy goth and glam jewelry store making handcrafted art that varies from subtle silver to gold pieces to glamorous bespoke. Inchu Bijou is more than just a company. They've built a community through advocacy and a welcoming attitude that has made them an institution here in Montreal. Located in the historic Chateau Saint-Ambroise, Inchu Bijou also runs seasonal themed markets called Maleficarum Market, or Marché Maleficarum en français, where artisans from all over get together and showcase and sell their wares. Drop by 4000 Rue Saint-Ambroise, Suite 278, and say hi to Astrid and the Wicked team, or head to inchubijou.com and enhance your style. The next Maleficarum Market will be on the weekend of February 8th and 9th. We'll see you there. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. How's it going, folks? I just got to quickly switch up the period. There we go. Now we're in the second period. All right, so in the chat, I need your help because I'm all alone here tonight hosting things. I need you to tell me your feelings on Jakub Dobeš, who waited almost 2 weeks, I think, or maybe even a little bit over 2 weeks before getting the start tonight. I thought to start the game, he looked a little bit out of sorts. He wasn't very focused in. I don't know if you could really give him much of a chance on the first Michkov goal, but the second goal was not great. It looked like he just couldn't track the puck. But after that, my goodness, I thought he was astonishing. I really think that he keyed himself in a way that deserves a lot of credit. And yeah, the goals piled in towards the end of the game. I don't put it on him. I really don't. I think you look at that, the game changed fundamentally on that lack of goaltender interference call. And I want to talk about goaltender interference and compare it to the Gallagher thing. We'll do that next segment maybe. But I really think this game probably gets tied if the NHL has any sort of integrity on how they call things. And I think it's something that we need to keep bringing up as much as it's frustrating and kind of doesn't really give us much. The fact that the Canadian, not the Canadians, the fact that the NHL has a 200 plus page rule book and it all gets thrown out the window on a regular basis to go with vibes is astonishing and sad. It's not good. But Dobie specifically, I thought was fantastic. I also am in the middle of writing a piece for Habs Eyes on the Prize. I guess I haven't really announced that on this show yet, that we entered into a partnership with Habs Eyes on the Prize where now I'm going to be writing again. So I haven't written about the Habs regularly probably since, I guess, Sport Logic time. So it would be 2021-ish since the last time I wrote about the Habs or even about hockey on a regular basis. I've leaned more into the video side, but I think I'm much better in terms of like bringing my analysis and explaining things on the writing side. So if you are interested, you can go to habseyesontheprize.com and check out my writing now once a week, usually going to be on Fridays, I think. The Montembeault article will probably be Saturday just because today was crazy. I wasn't able to finish it. But I'm going to go through Sam Montembeault's career because I find that in Montreal, there's a huge amount of love for Sam Montembeault, but there's also a lot of people who are very lukewarm about him and like unwilling to like step over the threshold of enjoying this player. And I think a lot of it has to do with he's the guy who had the unenviable task of being the next guy after Carey Price. And if you go through what he's accomplished over the last 3 years, yeah, he has some consistency issues. And yeah, he is not Carey Price and never will be. But he's a guy that we really should appreciate. Like, this is a very good goaltender who's given the Canadiens a lot of quality starts over the last 3 years and has played through injuries, has never complained despite, sometimes should have maybe started more. Sometimes maybe he should have gotten more rest. And also, he's on a bargain basement deal and costs nothing to acquire. And he's a hometown guy. Like, what's preventing people from falling in love with Sam Montembeault? It's a question I'm going to be asking and hopefully answering on Habs Eyes on the Prize shortly. And I think that the way that the Canadiens have handled Dobesh and Montembeault's starts over the last couple of weeks are ripe for criticism. I think that they did lean a little bit too hard on Montembeault, but I also think that we need to give a little bit of leeway to the coaching staff, who we all recognize are not very experienced, that this is also the first time that they've chased down a playoff spot. And they're trying to get the most that they can out of what they have, which, again, is not an elite team by any stretch of the imagination. All right, I'm going to just check in on the chat here quickly. Trinka says Monty was a good waiver claim and does not get enough credit for for going from that to a starter. I totally agree. Like, absolutely huge career arc for Sam Montembeault, when it could have been very easy for him to be an also ran, right? After that first year in Montreal in 2021, 2022, where he played through, I think it was a hand injury in his trapper. Might have actually been the blocker, which, man, holding a stick for a whole game injury might have been a nightmare. But point is, he could have faded into the ether after that, right? The Canadiens had committed nothing to him, really. I think it was like 1 year after that they committed to him. He wasn't a big name. There was nothing to stop him from being wavered out. You know, Caden Primo could have jumped him if Primo had taken off in that stage of his career. Didn't happen. Monty battled. You know, he battled to get where he was. And I think that's something that I also respect about Dobesh. David W. says Dobesh looked quite rusty to start the game with the Habs gone down 3-1 after 20. Things did come alive in the third with the Habs and Flyers each having scored 3 goals. Defense was for the Habs an unmitigated disaster, no matter how many ugly goals Dobesh might have given up. Yeah, specifically losing the puck. Just losing where the puck is going so many times tonight. The Montreal Canadiens were really struggling. Although I will say that the gap in defensive coverage is not nearly as large tonight as people are making it out to be. The Flyers had some really high quality opportunities, but the Canadiens did too. It's just that Urson saved a bunch of them, and the Canadiens sent a lot of their shots wide. Like, high and wide was the theme tonight, frankly. They were missing very open shots most of the night. So sometimes you play a game that you're not the better team, but it's more even than it looks on the scoreboard, and it just doesn't hold out, right? The St. Louis game was very similar, actually. If you look at the breakdown of what each team was able to generate, Canadians actually played okay, but they weren't able to win. Sometimes it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I see some folks here in the chat. Natalie Petty says, online is my only community. I don't know a single hockey fan in real life. Well, listen, Natalie, we are happy to be your community, and we are here for you 100%. That is sad that you don't know other hockey fans in real life. I'm assuming you might not live in Canada, but if you do, hey, I'm sure we could find some stuff. Eventually, when this stuff gets going bigger, when Game Over starts taking off bigger, when we get our audience back that we had on SDPN, I do want to organize some meetups here in Montreal, and I want to organize some meetups in other cities too, across Canada, because we got to get people together. I think this is one of the big things that I've learned post-COVID, and the dream of this show happened during the COVID playoffs, when I saw, after those games where only 3,000 people were let into the Bell Center, and it was just like there was all this pent-up energy in the city and nowhere to go. And I thought, hey, why don't we get people together after the games and give them a quality post-game show that brings more to the table than, Uncle Leo from St. Leo calling in and yelling about Carey Price letting in a banana. We don't need that. What we do need is good analysis and great interactivity between the people running it and the people who make it what it is, which is you. All right, met you. I always love hearing your comments. It says, I'm getting more impatient for top NHLers, top 6 NHLers missing the net in the scoring area with time and space. My pet peeve is the missed shot that exits the ozone. Oh man, when Laine chose to take that big wide slap shot with the net empty, listen, I'm not saying Laine was a problem tonight, and I think there's been this weird discourse around Line where it seems like people are starting to turn on him a little bit, or at least some people are, that it seems driven by media. We talked about it with Mark last week. I'm not on that board. I think Line is a very flawed player in many respects, but brings something completely unique. Sometimes his decision making is a little bit tough. Natalie says she's from Adelaide, Australia. Hey, there's hockey fans in Australia. I know it. I was talking to one on Blue Sky yesterday who was trying to get me to move to Australia if things go bad here with the Americans down south. But yes, trying hard to spread the hockey love. It is tougher when you're in an area where hockey's not a natural thing, right? And Australia's a bit warm for outdoor hockey rinks, I'm sure, most of the time. All right, let's move on here. Unless we want to talk more about Dobesh. I feel like we could say more about Dobesh, but I think the main takeaway for him is just that was impressive. I liked how he settled into the game. I thought he gave the Canadiens several chances to win this game. Kept them in it when they up some really bad shots. Oh, was it you, Natalie, on Blue Sky? That's awesome. I apologize for not recognizing the name. It's been really, really chaotic last week. I've had last Thursday, we had a similar situation where my wife and I were both working at night. I've got to take care of the kids at home and then do the show. And then halfway through the show, I don't know if anybody who was watching then remembers, but I heard feet coming down the stairs in our basement. And I was like, who is awake? Which child? And it was like 11:30 at night. And it was Miles because they'd gotten sick. And so we were home for 4 days with gastro in the house, trying to like manage everything over the weekend and then trying to get like things back going this week. And it's just been like every time you take a step, there's something else. And then we both got sick. So always fun. It's like the Habs, you know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's life in a lot of ways. Hockey is a great analogy for so many things. I had a good one the other day. I will tell you about it in our press conference, maybe if we're interested. We'll see. We'll try to move on here. All right, I want to talk about the goaltender interference stuff, but before I do, I'm going to tell you all about the Saint Motel, which is a selfie studio here in Montreal that is right next to Inchu Bijou, in the historic Chateau Saint Ambroise. It's really cool. I want you to check it out. And when you do, you'll have fun, I promise. And then after that, we will talk about the goaltender interference, call or non-call, that turned this game around. Looking to make awesome memories with your friends? Take some promotional pictures or videos for your business? Check out Le Saint Motel in Montreal's Sud-Ouest borough. It's an amazing selfie studio located in Montreal's historic Chateau Saint Ambroise, right next to Inchu Bijou. It boasts 12 plus unique decors for you to enjoy and make memories with. Hop into their iconic heart-shaped ball pit, or transport yourself back in time to Expo 67. Le Saint Motel can also come to you with mobile decor setups available to rent for events, including setup and takedown, or you can head to lesaintmotel.com right now for more details, or to check out their amazing decors that are always being updated. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. Welcome back. I am not Game Over Montreal. This is Game Over Montreal. I am Andrew Berkshire, and I apologize that I am struggling to keep my thoughts together, folks. Terry says, oh my God, you guys look very young. Wouldn't have thought you had kids. Yeah, I am 38 years old. I have 2 kids, a 7-year-old and a soon-to-be 5-year-old who's about to head into kindergarten. It's a adventure and a half, to say the least. The second one, you think, okay, this will be twice as hard. We can handle it. And then it's like, how about 5 times as hard? It's a tough thing, that parenting, especially in modern times. Trigger says, you kind of are Game Over Montreal. I mean, a bit, but listen, you are as much Game Over Montreal as I am. All right. I think that's what I have come to believe over my time in hockey media is I think in general, media disregards fans far too much. And I understand the reason why. For anybody who has ever had like a social media account around, I would say it changes around 10,000 followers. Once you get to that point, there's a kind of repetition that happens in your interactions that becomes frustrating. People saying the same things, or like not reading what you say and responding, or not listening to what you say and responding, and like the same criticism over and over again, and people start to disregard or uh, toss things aside or get angry at people. And I'm as guilty as anybody else, but I find in general media sees fans as, immature and biased, and I see fans as they are people who have every ability to understand as much about hockey as I do. Maybe they don't have the tools. Maybe they do. Some of them will be smarter than me. And the fact is, I came to hockey media being told constantly that I didn't know what I was talking about, and that bloggers were stupid, and that analytics were stupid, and hockey men were the only people who knew anything about hockey. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of us started getting hired by NHL teams, and now every single NHL team has an analytics department. And there are several NHL teams who won Stanley Cups because of analytics. And by the way, folks, in case you didn't know, the reason why scoring is up, cheers, it was analytics. I can actually tell you why. I remember when I first got hired by Sportlogic, and they took multiple seasons of data and mapped them out on rinks, specifically shot location data. And while we had a rough estimate based on NHL shot locations, the scoring what the scoring chance area was, right? Like we called it the baseball home plate area. So it goes from the sides of the net up to the face-off dots on a diagonal, and then up to the top of the face-off circle and over. So it just creates that home plate shape. And then Sportlogic found that there's a diamond shape. You go out from each side of the net, out a little bit, and then up into the middle. And that middle area, they started calling the high danger area, or inner slot. I apologize. And 50% of all NHL goals, or close to it, were scored within that tiny little area. And shooting percentage went from around 11% in the high slot to like 26% in that inner slot. And that information, going from we think this to now we know this, changed the way NHL shooting patterns worked. Sportlogic also brought out passes to the slot and contextualized how much those impact the expected shooting percentage of the following shot, right? So you had this data that you could put together, and all of a sudden teams all over the league were saying, oh, okay, so if we change our strategies to produce more of this kind of shot instead of this kind of shot, then we'll score more goals. Which, you know what happened? The death of the point shot on the power play. That happened almost immediately after that Sportlogic data started. And that kind of stuff is so fascinating to me, and it's all because of hockey nerds. Nerds who weren't hockey people way back in the day, writing for free on blogs, and now those people work for NHL teams. That's the smartest people in the NHL. And the fact is, not coming from a hockey background does not preclude you from having something to contribute in hockey analysis. And frankly, sometimes it's better. And I think that's one of the cool things about this idea with like Game Over, is that we're trying to build something for people who aren't necessarily the expected hockey audience. We want to be extremely welcoming for queer folks and people from different racial backgrounds and people who have disabilities, right? Who maybe aren't heard or seen in other hockey spaces. But because those people grow as people in a different mindset, dealing with different things, they might see things in hockey that the rest of us have looked past or ignored or not seen at all, and bring it into the conversation that expands the way that we talk about the game. And that is what I find super exciting, because we can have unexpected results, like scoring going to the highest rates that we've seen at even strength since like the early 90s. That's cool stuff. And I think that's how you move the sport forward, more than just, staging a game in Sweden here and there. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that goaltender interference call quickly, and then we'll move on to the press conference so you all can have your say a bit more. Because I don't know how you guys felt, but when I was watching the replay of that one, and Bobby Brink goes in the crease, his own decision. He's not pushed in. He very clearly interferes with Dobesh. Like he's touching him in the crease. Everything's in the crease. Now, you can make the argument, and I will not even push back on it, that Brink's interference didn't change the course of what was going to happen with that goal. I agree. I think that's a fine call to make if that's the call that you're going to make all the time. But then I think of when Brendan Gallagher had his own stick, I think it was his own stick, slashed by a goaltender. Who was it that did that? Was it Bobrovsky that did that? I'm trying to remember which game it was. But the goaltender goes in, like he reaches out and initiates contact with Brendan Gallagher outside of the crease, I might add. And then Gallagher drifts a little bit into the crease, and they say that that prevented the goaltender from making the save when it had nothing to do with it. There was no impact from Gallagher touching the goaltender's stick to the goaltender failing to even recognize that the shot was happening before moving and being beat on that goal. So if that one gets called back and this one doesn't, what's the explanation? One of them's not in the crease, one of them is. Okay, so in the crease is worse. One of them, a player was pushed in, or neither of them player was pushed in. Sorry, Gallagher wasn't pushed in. He was kind of just skated in. But he did try to stop, and Gallagher did stop outside the crease, right? So it's not like he was pushing things over the line. And then contact, one initiated by the goaltender, one initiated by the player. What are we doing here? What are we doing? This is Bobby Brink, such an 80s name. Yeah, it's a fantastic hockey. MFM says Gally did come out in the scrum about how he did not like that call, and talked about incompetence. Yeah, and I'm glad that Gallagher is willing to say stuff like that, but also it doesn't help him. You know, his reputation with the refs is not amazing. I know we had Tim Peel on this show like 2 years ago say that refs actually like Gallagher, but I think everything Tim Peel says is wrong, and that's not necessarily constrained to hockey. As you can see, if you've ever seen anything that he posts on Twitter, which if you still see, just get off Twitter, folks. You don't need to be on there. Terrible website owned by Nazis. All right, let's flip over to the presser because I think that makes sense. We can skip a little bit faster here and let you all have your say. So if you have questions for me, now is the time to load them into the chat, and I will go over them, and we'll have some fun here. Because that's what Game Over Montreal is all about. It's your catharsis, your joy, your fun, your learning, anything, your community. All right. Let's go through the chats here. Romelli says, I am Game Over Montreal, and so are you. And you. We are all Spartacus. Romelli says, funny because I see the media as the one being biased. Yeah, I agree with you, Romelli. Honestly, there is a bias in media, and what I find frustrating about legacy media in general and their approach to hockey is there's always a bias because everybody has it. But every time you ask someone, they're like, oh, I'm not a fan. Like, I'm not a fan of such and such team. And sometimes they're telling the truth. Sometimes there are guys who are just, or women, sorry, whoever, who are just fans of the sport or fans of certain players. But everybody has a bias about something. For example, I have a bias towards small players because I grew up as a short guy and I like players who play with a chip on their shoulder when they're small. You know, one of my favorite players growing up was Theo Fleury. Didn't work out as an adult. He's terrible now. Although I will say, I think a lot of it has to do with the awful trauma that he's dealt with in his life. But I have a bias for small players. I like goalies. I grew up as a goalie, so I like talking about goalies. I like the Montreal Canadiens as well, and I am going to be somewhat biased towards the Montreal Canadiens. But I tell you that going in so that you can weigh that into what I'm saying in my analysis, right? So when somebody says they're not biased at all, they're trying to tell you at the same time, you can take everything I say as truth. That's just not true. Admit the bias is up front and then tell the truth as you see it based on the evidence that you have at hand. If you're wrong, you're wrong. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I get pointed out things in the chat during the show. that correct me on stuff. And you know what happens? I say, oh, yeah, you're right. And then we move on. And now we have correct information because that's how life works. We don't need to get upset about it. All right. Tony B says, you're spot on. Our guys are not clinical with their shots. Yeah, it was really messy tonight. They weren't putting it on the net very well. A lot of high and wide. Claire Capoletti says, are you glad Crosby surpassed Gretzky? Heck yeah, I am, Claire. And hi, Claire. Every Gretzky record that falls is good news. I don't want to give any more airtime to fake Canadians. And I know that there are some people who still think that Gretzky is some great Canadian who contributed lots to society. I'm sorry, he's a hockey player. He is great at one thing, and that's hockey. So I don't call him the great one anymore. He's the guy who was great at one thing. And that one thing, yes, it's very fun, and it gives us a lot of entertainment, and it is a part of Canada's identity, but it doesn't make him anywhere close to a great Canadian. You want to see a great Canadian, look at Terry Fox or Tommy Douglas. It doesn't have to be a hockey player. Romelli says Monty for both games, Carolina and Florida. I would be interested to see if they would be willing to try Dobesh. He hasn't played in so long. Looked better as the game's gone on. He's young. And I do think Monty needs a little bit of a rest. I think that overall, his struggles are overblown. And people get really frustrated because they want wins more than anything. And, when you let in 6, it doesn't look great. And Montembeault has the habit of weak ones go past, even though he makes a lot of great stops. Sometimes the ones he lets in look weak, and that's frustrating, and it can be momentum killing. But I think maybe a little bit of a mental break, just a couple days, is good for him. And I just feel like after tonight, with how good Dobesh was through like the final 50 minutes or so, it would make sense to give him another crack at it. I feel like he'd give you a great game tomorrow. I don't think he will. I don't think there's any chance St. Louis starts him again tomorrow night. But Trinka says I'd like to get more starts for Dobesh. I agree. Like, I understand the idea behind riding your starter and wanting to get the most out of last few games, trying to get as many points as you can in the bag. But I don't think that the fall in goaltending quality between Montembeault and Dobesh is big, if there's one at all right now. And I just like watching Dobesh. Like, does anybody else just enjoy the way he tends goal? He's so old school in his energy. He reminds me of like a 1990s goaltender in terms of how active he is and how flashy he is in the crease. This is going to be a really old reference for many, many people here watching because we're on YouTube, but he reminds me a little bit of Rick Tabaracci. Just like so much flash. And I'm sorry for throwing out names from the early 90s, but that's what I've got for you tonight. Romelli says, I like Dobesh versus Florida, but I don't see it happening. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to happen either. It's one of those things where in an ideal world where you can control all of the variables, maybe a coach would make that decision, but when you've actually got responsibility on the line, you're probably not going to. It's just the way. All right, folks, if you got any more questions, dump them into the chat. But if you don't, I'm probably going to check out early here tonight because I can feel my voice starting to fail me a little bit. And I could hear that my wife is home from teaching dance. So I wouldn't mind giving her a hug and going to bed. All right, let's see what we got here. Drew Trinka says the way he came to play that puck out on the Flyers breakaways. I did love that. Really says talk about a flashback. Yeah, if you haven't heard of Rick Tabaracci's name recently, I know, again, another persona non grata, but when I was home over the holidays at my parents' place, I saw like some of my old stuff from when I was a kid, and one of them was, I think it was like Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em 5, and Don Cherry sucks. Just not a good person, but I remember growing up watching those VHS tapes and over and over and over again, and that one specifically was the one that came out after 93 when the Canadiens won the cup the last time. And that was like every day I'd come home from school and watch the Habs win the cup on the VH. Watch Patrick Waugh doing the I'm going to Disneyland, and I have a picture, I have to put it up actually, of that moment that I believe my dad gave me for my wedding. That it's just a part of my childhood, part of my like hockey core memory building was watching those old videos. And I wonder now if, like, I know there's YouTube compilations. This is such a random rant, but I don't know if there's anything now that has replaced that for young Canadians. I don't know if there's something out there to get them into hockey in the same way. If there is, by the way, let me know about it because I'd love to show my kids. Because right now, I think as much as it's somewhat interesting to them, going to a hockey game and stuff, it's also dad's work. So it's not the most entertaining thing to them. I think sometimes they see hockey as the thing that takes dad away from them in the evenings. So not the greatest thing for them. All right, David W says, I can understand that a voice fades. I've had that this month due to a cold that earlier on featured much heavier coughing. In the meantime, I plan to watch the next Habs game if I can. Heck yeah, David will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow must be the Florida game, right? Haven't got the schedule in front of me, but I will be back here tomorrow. I'll be back live with Conor Tomalty. We'll have a fun show, and hopefully a Habs win, because this isn't as fun when they lose. I mean, it's fun to give each other some catharsis, and we'll go to bed not angry about it, hopefully, but it's so much more fun when they win. Let's get some wins, folks. Go Habs, go. We'll see you in the next one, and have fun out there, all right? Be nice to each other. Love you lots.